Check, check, check. Good evening, everybody. Chief Meteorologist Brad Panovich here at WCNC. Welcome to Live Impact Weather. We've got a little bit of breaking weather news. It's a little bit of news and weather combined here. We've had some slow-moving storms in parts of the North Carolina mountains and Tennessee, and what you're seeing on your screen right now is a flash flood warning, which is for parts of what is Coke County, I believe, is the pronunciation there. I don't think it's Cook, but it's C-O-C-K-E, which is the county just on the other side of the North Carolina border. And what you're looking at above me is a mudslide and flooding on Interstate 40 near that area, exit 451, I believe. So it's the last exit literally coming out of Tennessee. It is shut down Interstate 40 between Tennessee and North Carolina. You can see several cars are trapped. There's actually water rescues going on. And while that looks like super muddy water, it's a little bit of mud, rocks, and water. So it's not just water. There was a slow-moving thunderstorm that was moving through this area. It caused a flash flood, which brought a debris flow onto the interstate. And if you're familiar with this area, this is past the area that was impacted by Helene. That's the area that is now open just one lane in each direction at 35 miles per hour. This is just past that as you go into Tennessee. So it's a really bad spot, because if you've driven through the Smoky Mountains on Interstate 40, once you get on 40, there's not a lot of places to pull off or go anywhere. So this is backing up traffic pretty far into North Carolina and Tennessee. So if you're traveling in this direction, or you have friends or family, tell them to avoid this area completely. So this area right on the state line at Interstate 40, this is unfortunately an area that was heavily impacted by Helene as well. You can actually see some of the barricades and some of the cones there, the barrels, probably due to some of the recovery efforts still ongoing from Helene. So the video you're seeing is from Tennessee DOT, which one of their employees is in that area. They shot video. You see from the video as well, the other thing that strikes me from this, it's completely sunny. So the storm has clearly moved on, but it dumped some really heavy rain. I'm going to look at the rainfall estimates in that area. So on the mountain here, just on the other side of the interstate, it looks like, let me get my cursor here and we'll kind of show you some of the totals. It looks like on the side of the mountain there was maybe 2 to 3 inches of rain in a short period of time, and it rushed right down the mountain there and took a debris flow with it. So
and it's so localized too.
Yeah, it's
a couple miles one direction or another. It could have been different.
I mean, when we look at the radar, so I'll pull up the radar again in this area, you'll see, again, I can actually pull up the Morristown radar here. I'm going to add it to our mix here just to give you an idea. There's not much going on except for there is another storm approaching from the west. So let me go back a couple hours. What I'm going to do is it might take a second to load here, James, as I'm talking, but the data will load and we'll go back and see what this storm looked like. I'll loop it a couple times as the new data comes in. But again, the reason we're bringing this, a lot of folks, I mean, if you go over to Gatlinburg or Dollywood or Sevierville, which is a very popular summer destination, you thought, man, 40's just opening after Helene. We got that 2 lanes open. This is going to cause major havoc because there is no easy way to get around, as we learned during Helene. So let me see if I can loop this.
This is like reopening a wound.
Yeah.
Like you had a wound, it started to heal, and you accidentally ripped it open again because this is such a sore, sensitive subject in a very vulnerable place that does not want to see scenes like this.
Yeah. So it looks like 3:30 to 4 o'clock. There was a bunch of lightning there. And my radar data is still loading. It's actually pulling it from the cloud. But if you look right here, this was around 4:13. You see all the lightning strikes over that area. That looks to me when the storm was actually sitting over that area. So we're actually pulling that data right now. But the lightning already came up. So around 4 o'clock, and you could see it moved out fairly quickly. And then we went right back to sunny skies. So that's a lot of water in a short period of time. In a mountainous area. And again, they've seen rain like us. It's been like the same pattern everywhere across the southeast where we've seen tremendous amount of rain. So even though the totals may not jump off the map to you, the fact that it's fallen over the same areas repeatedly will kind of tell you. So you can kind of see that storm. You can actually see it as it moved out right here. This is what it looked like when it moved into North Carolina. Okay, now it's starting to load a little bit there at a time.
Well, 1 or 2 inches of rain is what? That's what your lawn wants in a week?
Yeah, that's like a week's worth of rain. And it looks like here it fell. Looking at where the storm is at 5:05, that happened in 30 minutes.
Wow.
So, yeah, that's a lot of rain in a short period of time. There it is. It's loading slowly but surely, but that's the storm. And guys, that's all it takes this time of year, especially in a mountainous terrain, to get one slow-moving tropical downpour like that produces a ton of rain. So, again, for folks just tuning into the stream tonight, we've got this pretty significant impact from a flash flood and mudslide on Interstate 40. It's on the Tennessee side, so if you're looking for information from the North Carolina side, I'm sure they're going to start detouring people around this area. This is past the area that just opened. When did that open? Like 2 months ago, 3 months ago?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
It's in the spring. It happened right around spring break time. That we finally got Interstate 40 open after Helene. 1 lane in each direction on the westbound lanes, and you can only go 35 miles an hour through there. No trucks. So,
except for that one that's in the mudslide?
Yeah, but that's probably somebody going towards there and getting off before that detour, because I do think there's a truck route around that area. But yeah, you do see 1 truck stuck. And by the way, that's on both sides of the interstate. So it's just not one side. It looks like both sides are flooded. You can see the exit sign in the background. That exit is actually 451. There's a still picture.
I can pause it.
Do you have the still picture, by the way?
I can get there.
I'm kind of curious because the still picture shows exactly that
There it
same
is.
picture, and it's essentially
451.
451. So that's the very last exit, I believe, before you get into North Carolina. So the way the exit numbers work, they start on one side of the state and go all the way across. So
This vantage point also shows us what I would call debris flow.
yeah.
that's in that
So
water.
that's the picture, and yeah, you could see that. Yeah, it looks like muddy water, but you're right. There's a lot of debris there, so that's a pretty significant flash flood in that area. So again, we're seeing that on Interstate 40, but let me show you some of the storms that are popping up in our area, because we do have some storms. They're moving, thank goodness, across the foothills. Got some reports out of Lenore, Caldwell County, some really heavy rain, but these are moving pretty quickly, so we don't expect flash flooding with these. But if they do go over the same area repeatedly, you definitely would be concerned about flash flooding. A lot of cloud to ground lightning in there. I'll widen this out. We're watching, like last night, remember we talked about those storms in Tennessee and down into Georgia? They impacted us yesterday, and exactly as we thought, between 10 and 11, but they fell apart. The wider view doesn't show as many storms down in Georgia, and the ones that are developing are falling apart. So a little bit of good news that we won't see a repeat of those big wind event we had in the upstate last night. I think at one point we had 66,000 people without power in the upstate, was something like that. There was a lot of people without power in the upstate. 60 reports, 57 reports, I think, of wind damage. And so there was some significant wind with that system last night. Thankfully, it weakened as it got closer to the Piedmont of the Carolinas, but it still produced quite a bit of wind, especially in areas like Cleveland County, Rutherford County, Polk County. So tonight, we can look at the futurecast, give you an idea of what we expect. Most of these storms we expect to calm down through the evening hours. As we go overnight, things dry out. Now, tomorrow is a really interesting day. I'll be completely transparent. Storm Prediction Center has us in a low to medium risk, but look at our futurecast. There's not any storms in our area. So tomorrow is going to be one of those days where we may only see a handful of storms. When I mean a handful, maybe 3 or 4, but probably 2 or 3 of those is going to be severe. So if a storm can get going tomorrow, it's going to have the potential to produce damaging straight line winds. To me, the ingredients there are for what we call downburst. We've got a pretty good downburst profile tomorrow. The thing I think we're lacking is there's a little bit of a capping inversion, and there's some drier air at the low and mid levels, which would preclude widespread storms. It just means the storms that get going are going to have the potential to be really strong or severe. And then that cools us off, believe it or not. And this will be the only time you hear me say cool probably for the next week, because that little front that comes through tomorrow cools us off slightly and dries us out, so much so that our dew points could fall into the 60s briefly, which sounds like heaven right now when you got dew points in the 70s. Our heat index on Friday will only be about 93. And then we go into Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and we see those heat indices jump up above 100 degrees. And we're starting to see some of the early heat impact graphics. Great product here that Weather Prediction Center puts out. So we had some moderate to major impacts today. Probably didn't verify too well. Tomorrow, moderate, which makes sense. And look at Friday. I mean, this is why Friday could be the best day. Just minor impacts, meaning heat indices only in the low to maybe mid 90s in a few spots, but most of the day will be pretty nice. Now, Saturday, we start to see the moderate impacts return. I'd say Saturday is probably your typical summer day. Sunday gets a little worse, major impacts, and then we go into Sunday and look at all the red, widespread major impacts. And by Monday and Tuesday, we could see some of that purple, which is the extreme impacts. That's going to be close to excessive heat advisory or excessive heat warning criteria. So it's not only going to be hot, but it's going to be super muggy. And that heat dome you hear us talk about all this week is going to be centered over the Northeast. So here's the thing. It won't just be us. You're going to be hearing about this heat dome till you're probably sick of it, because it's still not here yet. And it's just not us. All the big cities of the Northeast will be impacted, like New York, Washington, Baltimore, Philly, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Columbus, even Boston and the parts of New England will be impacted by this heat. So this heat is going to be serious coming up here next week. And to give you an idea of how hot it's going to be, I always like to end with the 7-day forecast, but I'm going to show you the 10-day forecast because it'll really reiterate the heat here. So the 7-day forecast, you could see us getting into the mid and upper 90s, and then we go 10 days into the future, and just let that soak in for a second. That is not going to be a fun week next week. I mean, 98 degrees. And the irony of this is last year at this point, we had 4 90-degree days already. This year we're at 3. And last year, when did we get our big heat? Right around the 4th of July. I think it was 98 on the 4th, but the day before it was like 103. It was ridiculously hot last year. And here we are again at the end of June, going into early July. We have the potential for some heat. Now, you see that feel like reading or the heat index? We talk about that every single year. People think that's a fake number, but it's actually a real thing. It affects your body. And meteorologist Brittany Van Voorhees talks about what the heat index means, how it's calculated, and what we'll be dealing with next week as part of those high heat indices.
It's not the heat, it's the humidity, is a phrase you've probably heard during the summer dozens of times in the South. But it's actually both. Heat index refers to what the temperature feels like to the human body when relative humidity is combined with air temperature. When our bodies get too hot, they sweat to cool themselves off. If the sweat can't evaporate because there's too much moisture and humidity already present, our bodies can't regulate temperature properly. This is why we call heat index the feels like temperature during the summer, because we feel hotter in humid conditions. The heat index is calculated based on this formula, or you can use one of these charts based on the temperature and the dew point. Just remember, these charts are based on temperatures in the shade, so if you're going to be in the direct sunlight, you have to add about 10 to 15 degrees. Let's look at a few examples. If it's 100 degrees and the dew point is 60, it'll feel around 101. Swap out a tropical dew point of 75 degrees, now it feels near 114. Prolonged exposure to elevated heat index values to a variety of heat disorders. So when is it considered dangerous? A heat index at or above 103 degrees can lead to heat exhaustion or heat cramps. The worst case scenario, heat stroke, which is a medical emergency, occurs with a heat index 125 degrees or higher. Raising your weather IQ and hopefully not the heat, I'm meteorologist Brittany Van Voorhees.
Yeah, the heat index, oh man, and you feel it. And trust me, as somebody who likes to run in the middle of the day, you can tell when the heat index is getting up there. So heat's going to be a big story going to next week. But tonight we wanted to talk a little bit about a situation that impacted us earlier in the month in late May and could be another impact we see later on. And you might remember also big impacts going back to 2023. And what we're talking about are Canadian wildfires. We had all this smoke, and we actually had poor air quality in the Carolinas back in 2023. We had ozone action days and smoke alert days for poor air quality because of Canadian wildfire smoke. But the same thing is happening again this year. Take a look at some of the satellite imagery. So I went back and looked at the imagery. So this is from May 29th, and I'm going to zoom in on some of the wildfires. You can actually see them in parts of Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba, which really had some of the worst fires here in 2025. What I want to show you is I'm going to widen the view here. We're going to go a couple days into the future here, and you could see the big smoke plume that developed. And then this is May 30th. We'll go to May 31st. So think about this was the weekend after Memorial Day. Remember Memorial Day was really early. It was the weekend before this. Look at all that smoke that came down from those Canadian wildfires. And here in the Carolinas, we had thick smoke that weekend. After Memorial Day. In fact, it was really hazy. You couldn't even see the sky. It kind of looked like a white kind of wax paper over the sun. And so we wanted to talk a lot about the Canadian wildfires because people had a lot of questions like, why are we seeing smoke here? Why are the Canadian wildfires so massive? And so we talked to a professor from the University of Ottawa who specializes in remote sensing and AI forecasting. And he talked a little bit about some of the factors that went into them, but really wanted to talk about Canadian wildfires in general.
Currently, Canada is facing an alarming wildfire situation. We have almost 240 active fire across the country, and even 91 of them are out of control. More than 4 million hectares of forests have already burned. And I can say resulting in 3 provinces in Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, more than 33,000 people evacuated from their house. And even I had a look on it right now, even as of June of 2025, Canadian wildfire have released approximately more than 2 million tons of PM 2.5. It's really huge.
Yeah, so Professor I got to pronounce his name right, Banakari, I think that's how he pronounced it, because he is from or ran originally, and he studied in France and now works in Eastern Canada, where he both speaks English and French. So you notice his accent there. He talked a lot about how massive the wildfires have been and the amount of smoke, which is what he referred to as PM 2.5. We talk a lot about that with air quality. But some of the factors this year were kind of unique, and he really early on knew that there was going to be problems in Manitoba in particular, and he talked about some of the factors that played into kind of the perfect storm of wildfires that really developed this spring and into early summer.
We need, and we have three important ingredients. I can say the first one is fuel, and the second ingredient is weather condition, and finally the third ingredient, the trigger. And when we try to understand and to look about all these three factors, and mostly the first two, one comes from the weather and I can say the nature, showed us what happened in this year, and even the situation was different from the 2023. We tried to study the anomaly of this variable, the important variable, like leaf index, I can say leaf area index, or LAI, and NDVI, normalized difference vegetation index, that lead us about the fuel. And when we had a look on the precipitation anomaly and the snow cover anomaly, for the first time over I can say the 20 last years, we saw all these four anomaly are negative.
Yeah, so having multiple things happen all at once with the leaf index as well as the drought. And then the other big factor that he talked about with me was you can have all these ingredients in place, but the number one thing about the trigger, humans are still the number one cause. So people being careless with campfires, cigarettes, spark arresters on ATVs. I mean, people don't even think about that. When you take an ATV or a UTV into the woods, in most states where we have wildfire danger and in parts of Canada, you have to have a spark arrestor on the muffler. And what that is so that when you're going through that, the muffler doesn't spit out sparks and cause a fire. The other thing that can cause fire is taking a vehicle or one of those UTVs into high grass or brush, and the muffler itself being hot can ignite a wildfire. So humans are the number one cause of this. You heard him talk quite a bit about the PM 2.5. And that's a parameter, that's basically the particles of smoke. The 2.5 is the size of the particles. Smoke particles are pretty large, and that's why using a mask or a cloth over your face can actually help protect you. But when you see that, that's one of those things that gets into your lungs. That's the soot, the smoke, the smog that you see in the air. And some of the levels we saw with these wildfires was tremendous. I don't know, James, can you take the Air Now map? Because the Air Now map, and we show this on air sometimes, shows the air quality. And so when green is what we want to see. But when we have wildfires, we'll start to see orange and red. And if you look in Canada right now, it's pretty good compared to where it was back in May. You see some of the wildfires, but when you get into these wildfire areas, you see some of these levels. And I'm just going to click on a location here. So you'll see the moderate levels, and it actually shows you the PM 2.5 air quality right now near Winnipeg is a purple air sensor. So it's in the green to yellow, and it's at 51. When we start seeing that above 150, we get into unhealthy. So when you see those numbers, anybody who has respiratory issues, I'm sure you're very familiar with these numbers because they potentially are the ones that would cause you to have asthma attack or have respiratory issues. So one of the things that Professor Bandankari does is he uses remote sensing, and he's come up with this AI modeling to help not only forecast where fires could spread, but in real time, he can help the firefighters on the ground know where they need to fight these fires. And this technology is hoping to partner with the United States and share information where this data could become available to everybody.
To be honest, in my opinion, right now, it's really the right time to move to the real-time the observation or real-time data. We need that. Maybe the first question is here, we in Canada, we have a lot of forests, at how we can detect all the country. There is no need to do that. Right now, by my AI model with drought condition, we have detected all the high-risk area in the Canada about the risk. And even we classified different, I can say, location in the forest, the Canadian forest with high risk of wildfire. And we need to focus in this area. at the first step. And when we focus in this area, by having the information from satellite image and even, different types of, I can say, remote sensing information that can help us, I believe right now these tools help us and make it possible to detect neo-ignition quickly. Even for the firefighter, the second count, we are in a situation, if we can act fastly, we can control really and the huge damage of wildfire. And even I believe to monitor the evolution of the fire on the ground by the satellite image. And even we are able to predict and to go to say where the smoke will go. Right now, again, these tools help us to understand. The other side, we have AI tools for the prediction. AI tools give us the possibility to know more and more about the future and about the, I can say, high risk area, low risk area, and we can categorize and we can put more effort and more resources in the area with the high risk of wildfire.
Yeah, so pretty amazing that he's able to help firefighters fight this in real time. And these wildfires in Canada, something else to take into consideration here is these wildfires are burning in boreal forests, which are really thick vegetation in northern parts of these provinces where not a lot of people live. And in often cases, you would think like in the United States, we kind of fight every fire, right? In Canada, because these are in such remote areas, it's not feasible to even get to them or fight them. And if they're not threatening property or mines or infrastructure, they sometimes just let these burn. And they actually will burn for months and months. In fact, I was reading a study about the 2023 fires that some of them overwintered, and they got this great name. I'm surprised we didn't use it, zombie fires. These fires will burn below ground in the peat moss, even in the winter. And there's some video of people going out in the winter and digging a hole and smoke pouring out of the ground. It blows my mind, but because there's so much organic material, and it might seem foreign to a lot of people, but in North Carolina, we get the same thing in eastern North Carolina, these peat fires, which will burn underground in almost that coal-like material, which makes them incredibly hard to put out. I think there was a fire in I was
thinking of Myrtle Beach this year.
Yes, 80, 90 days that fire burned. In New Brunswick County, I think there was a fire too that burned in the Croatan National Park or National Forest, which I think burned almost all summer, and it took a hurricane or something to flood it to basically put it out.
Good soaking.
Yeah, because it's underground. So when you get these organic materials, they act like, and think about it, that's what coal is and charcoal. It's essentially old organic material that's been carbonized and it becomes a fuel source. A lot of these boreal forests can do this as well. Now, the last thing we talked to the professor about was the climate impacts. Climate change is playing a big part in this, and so is the El Nino La Nina cycle. We talked about that going into hurricane season, and when you get persistent El Ninos in Canada, this tends to lead to bigger fire seasons, and he talked a little bit about that with us.
The situation is really, I can say, serious, and we need to act really fastly to reduce or at least to control the such type of negative impact for future. And even we need to consider, again, right now in the situation of the La Nina with the climate modeling. And even if we move again to El Nino can accelerate and can increase average of temperature at least 1 degree. And again, the consequences will be really important.
Yeah, so if you want to hear the complete interview I had with him this morning, you can go to our WCNC Weather IQ YouTube channel, and we've got it all posted there as well. Pretty insightful, and I really appreciate Professor Bandakari coming on with us because he was actually traveling to London, so he talked to us from London, England. He was heading over there for a conference, but he is a professor at the University at Ottawa. That's where he does most of his research, and he's actually kind of interesting because his background is in civil engineering, but he started doing remote sensing and AI work in wildfire research. I wanted to end real quickly with just a look at where the wildfire situation is right now. This is a current map of what's happening in Canada, and this is as of June 18th, so right now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off the fire perimeter. We're going to turn off the hot spots. These are all the active fires. So for everybody who forgot about the wildfire smoke and the wildfires in Canada, these are the number of fires burning. You can see the biggest number is in British Columbia, parts of Alberta, Saskatchewan, and then Manitoba, and now we're seeing some in Ontario. So that large area, if we get another dip in the jet stream, or we get a big ridge that builds over the middle of the country and we get northwest flow, we could see some of that wildfire smoke come back down here. And if you are traveling for vacation, heading up to the Rocky Mountains or heading out west, you might experience some of that wildfire smoke from the Canadian wildfires. It's a very unique situation, much different than what we see here in the United States. So thanks for joining us tonight for Live Weather Impact. Don't go anywhere, though. Coming up in 2 minutes, Colin is going to have the latest on the breaking news of the day.